The council chamber was enormous. It stretched high above the floor, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose toward the domed ceiling. Representatives from 47 different species sat in those seats, each one believing themselves important. They sat in the highest tier, their blue skin gleaming under the lights. The moth sat nearby, their insect-like bodies clicking softly as they communicated among themselves. One stood on the lower floor in the speaking circle. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Next to him stood Wu, his tactical advisor, holding a data pad. They had been waiting for 3 hours to speak. 3 hours of listening to other species argue about trade routes and territorial disputes. 3 hours of being ignored. Finally, the High Chancellor gestured toward them. The leader's 4 eyes blinked slowly, a sign of boredom among his kind. "The human delegation may speak," announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Please be brief." One stepped forward. He had prepared his speech carefully. Humanity had worked hard for 70 years to build good relationships with the Council. They had shared technology. They had sent doctors and engineers to help struggling colonies. They had fought alongside Council forces against pirates and raiders. Now he needed to explain why the new Regulatory Compliance Act would hurt humanity badly. "Honored Council members," one began. "The proposed act would place severe restrictions on human colonies. It would limit our trade to approved routes only. It would require Council observers on every human military ship. These rules would make it nearly impossible for us to—" "Yes, yes," interrupted. "We have heard these concerns. The act applies to all younger species, not just humans. It is for the good of the galaxy." "But our colonies rely on free trade," one continued. "We have 15 worlds that would face economic collapse if—" A laugh cut through the air. It came from the section. Then another laugh joined it, this time from the moth representatives. Soon, dozens of council members were laughing. The sound filled the chamber like a wave. "Economic collapse," one of the moth delegates clicked. "Humans have been in space for barely 200 years. You know nothing of true economics." One felt Wu tense beside him. He raised a hand slightly, signaling his advisor to stay calm. They had expected this. The Council had grown more dismissive of humanity over the past decade. What had started as caution toward newcomers had become open contempt. "We only ask for consideration," one said, keeping his voice steady. "Perhaps some modifications to the act could—" "Modifications," leaned forward in his high seat. "Humans, you must understand your place. You arrived in this galaxy yesterday. They have sailed the stars for 12,000 years, the moth for 8,000. You do not dictate terms to us. You follow our wisdom or you leave." The chamber erupted in approval. Delegates stamped their feet, clicked their mandibles, or made whatever sound their species used to show agreement. The message was clear. Humanity did not matter. One looked at Wu. His advisor nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility many times. Earth's leadership had given them authorization to act if things went badly. This was as bad as it could get. "Very well," one said quietly, but his voice carried through the chamber, cutting through the noise. "Then humanity will leave." The laughter stopped. Its expression shifted to something like amusement. "You will leave," the High Chancellor repeated. "Leave where? To your tiny collection of worlds, to hide in your corner of space." "We will leave the Galactic Council," one clarified. "Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all Council agreements, treaties, and obligations. We thank you for the opportunity to participate. We wish you well." He pulled out his data pad and pressed a single button. The action uploaded humanity's formal resignation to every terminal in the chamber. Alerts began chirping across the room as delegates received the notification. Stared at the message on his own screen. Then he began laughing again, louder than before. "You think we care? You think the galaxy will miss one primitive species? Go ahead, humans. Run home. Come back when you are ready to behave like adults." The chamber filled with laughter once more. One and Wu turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop them. No one called for them to reconsider. They simply walked out while the council mocked them. Outside the chamber, one finally allowed himself a long breath. Send the signal. Wu tapped his data pad. Across the galaxy, encrypted messages reached every human in council space. The messages were simple and clear. Pack up. Go home. Operation Silent Departure had begun. On Nexus Prime, the massive trading station, human engineers received the message. They finished their shifts quietly, said goodbye to confused coworkers, and boarded ships heading toward human territory. On Medical Station Sanctuary 7, Doctor and her staff of human doctors downloaded their research files. They left copies of basic information behind, but took the sophisticated disease tracking systems they had built. Within 6 hours, they were gone. At the Frontier Defense Network, Commander Wu received the message during a briefing with officers. She made an excuse about urgent business and left. Her entire battle group departed the joint military base before they realized what was happening. Across 600 worlds and thousands of stations on countless ships, humans quietly packed their belongings. They did not make announcements. They did not explain themselves. They simply left. Most aliens did not notice at first. A few asked questions when their human coworkers failed to show up for shifts. But humans were a small percentage of the galactic population. Surely their absence would not matter much. On the transport ship carrying him back to Earth, one looked at the reports coming in. Over 2 million humans had worked in council space. All of them were coming home. The evacuation would take weeks to complete, but it had started smoothly. Do you think they will realize? Wu asked. He sat across from one, reviewing the data. Eventually, one replied. But not yet. They think we are throwing a tantrum. They think we will come back apologizing within days. They are wrong. Yes, they are. One closed his eyes. He felt tired but also relieved. For 70 years, humanity had tried to be good galactic citizens. They had worked hard, shared freely, and asked for little in return. And what had they received? Contempt, mockery, dismissal. Now they would see what the galaxy looked like without humans. Let the council manage their own problems. Let them run their own stations and fight their own battles. Let them discover how much they had taken for granted. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving council space behind. One opened his eyes and looked out the window at the stars stretching past. Somewhere out there, the council was still laughing at humanity's departure. They would not be laughing for long. 3 weeks had passed since the humans left. Station Administrator stood in the control center of Nexus Prime and stared at the error messages flashing across his screens. Red warnings covered every monitor. The massive trading station processed 40% of the sector's commercial traffic. Right now, it was barely functioning. "What is happening?" demanded. His blue skin had turned a darker shade, a sign of stress. The engineer at the nearest console looked up nervously. "I do not know, sir. The docking system crashed again. Ships are waiting in holding patterns, but we cannot bring them in safely." "Fix it." "I am trying, sir, but the system is more complicated than I thought. The humans who maintained it left behind technical manuals, but—" The engineer gestured helplessly at his screen. "The documentation assumes knowledge we do not have." Wanted to scream. When the humans had departed, he had barely noticed. There had been maybe 50 of them working on the station, out of thousands of staff members. How much could 50 people really matter? Now he knew the answer. Those 50 people had kept everything running smoothly. The life support system fluctuated every few hours, causing temperature swings throughout the station. The quantum processing core that managed logistics kept freezing, requiring manual restarts. The docking protocols malfunctioned constantly, creating dangerous situations for incoming ships. Even the food replicators were acting strange, producing meals that tasted wrong. Had brought in engineers to replace the humans. They were trained professionals, graduates of the finest technical academies, but they stood in front of the station's systems looking lost and confused. "Sir," another technician called out, "another ship is requesting emergency docking. Their life support is failing." "Route them to Bay 12, ordered. Bay 12 is still offline from the last docking accident." Then Bay 13. Bay 13's atmosphere generators are not responding. Closed his eyes. This was a nightmare. Nexus Prime was one of the most important stations in Council space. If it failed completely, trade in the entire sector would collapse. "Get me High Chancellor," he said quietly. Halfway across the galaxy, on the Moth, a different crisis was developing. Doctor had spent 15 years building the Frontier Disease Prevention Network. She had created a system that monitored 600 colonies for disease outbreaks. The system used satellites, ground sensors, and automated analysis to catch problems early. Without her, the system was falling apart. A minor outbreak of fever started in a farming community. The automated sensors detected it and sent an alert, but no one was monitoring the central hub anymore. The alert sat unread for 3 days. By the time local officials noticed people getting sick, the disease had spread to 5 towns. Moth medical officials tried to activate the containment protocols Doctor had designed, but the protocols required coordination between different agencies, and she had been the one who managed that coordination. Without her, everyone argued about who should do what. Treatment supplies sat in warehouses while officials filled out authorization forms. The disease spread to 3 nearby star systems. Thousands fell ill. Medical stations that had relied on human doctors struggled to handle the surge of patients. In the council chambers, emergency reports arrived daily. Each one described a new problem in a different part of the galaxy. On the agricultural world of 5, crop yields had dropped by 40%. The colonial governor discovered that human agronomists had been optimizing the soil composition and crop rotation patterns for decades. Without them, the farmers had returned to traditional methods that worked poorly on the alien soil. In the asteroid mining fields of the belt, operations had ground to a halt. Human prospectors had been conducting surveys and mapping mineral deposits. They had shared their findings freely with mining companies. Now those companies discovered that their own survey technology was years behind what the humans had been using. Most of the belt remained unmapped. On the frontier world of 2 rival factions that had been on the edge of war for years suddenly began fighting. For the past decade, a human diplomatic team had been quietly mediating their disputes. With the humans gone, no one else understood the complex history between the factions well enough to negotiate peace. High Chancellor read the reports with growing frustration. He sat in his private office, reviewing the data on his personal screen. Surely these problems were temporary. The galaxy simply needed time to adjust. He called a meeting of his senior advisors. They gathered in a small conference room, away from the main council chambers. "These issues are minor," declared. "Every species that joins the council goes through an adjustment period. Humans are no different. They will realize they need us and come back soon." His military advisor, Admiral, shook his head. "Chancellor, I am receiving reports from our joint military operations. The humans took all their ships when they left. Our defense coverage of the outer rim has dropped by 30%. Then deploy more of our own ships." "We have tried, but our fleet commanders are discovering something unexpected. The humans were not just providing ships. They were providing tactical coordination. They had a way of analyzing battles and predicting enemy movements that we do not fully understand." Waved a hand dismissively. "We have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We do not need human help to defeat pirates." These are not just pirates anymore, Chancellor. The Ravagers have launched a major offensive. They seem to know exactly where our weak points are now that the humans are gone. Another advisor spoke up. Chancellor, we are also having problems with the Galactic Communications Network. Signal quality is degrading across several sectors. How is that possible? The network relies on quantum entanglement nodes. A human engineer named Bora and her team had been maintaining and optimizing them. We did not realize how much adjustment the system needed. Without constant maintenance, the nodes are falling out of synchronization. Felt something cold settle in his chest. He had spent weeks dismissing the reports as exaggerations. But sitting in this room, listening to his advisors list problem after problem, he could no longer pretend everything was fine. What about our scientists? He asked. Surely they can solve these technical problems. His science advisor looked uncomfortable. That is another concern, Chancellor. I have been reviewing our recent research breakthroughs. Many of them had significant human contributions that were never properly credited. The new fusion reactor design, the medical, the terraforming improvements. Humans were involved in all of them. That cannot be true. Humans have only been in space for 200 years. Yes, Chancellor, but they approach problems differently than we do. They see solutions we miss, and now they are gone. The room fell silent, looked around at his advisors. They all looked worried now. No one was dismissing the situation anymore. What are you saying? Asked slowly. Admiral spoke carefully. Chancellor, I think we may have made a mistake. Humans were more important to the functioning of the Council than any of us realized. They worked quietly, never demanding recognition. We thought that meant they did not matter. We were wrong. No, stood up abruptly. No, I will not accept that. They have led this galaxy for 12,000 years. We do not need humans. This is just a temporary disruption. Maybe it is even sabotage. Yes, that makes sense. The humans sabotaged our systems before they left. His advisors exchanged glances but said nothing. Could see they did not believe him. He barely believed himself. Get out, said, all of you, I need to think. They left quickly, sat alone in his office staring at the reports on his screen. Numbers and graphs showed declining efficiency across every major system in Council space. Trade was down. Military effectiveness was down. Communication was degrading. Disease was spreading. And it had only been 3 weeks. Made a decision. He would not admit publicly that humans were important. He would not give them that satisfaction. Instead, he would blame them for the problems and demand they return to fix their sabotage. The Council would authorize military action if necessary. Humans would learn they could not defy the Galactic Council. They would come back, and they would accept whatever terms the Council demanded. Began drafting orders for Admiral. The fleet would travel to human space and deliver an ultimatum. It was time to remind humans of their place in the galaxy. 2 months had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. What had started as minor problems had become a full crisis. The galaxy was unraveling. The Galactic Trade Network had been the foundation of interstellar commerce for 3,000 years. Ships carried goods between worlds, currencies were exchanged, and resources flowed where they were needed. The system was complex, requiring constant management and adjustment. Human economists and engineers had been managing much of that complexity. Now the system was dying. On the trade world of Station, Merchant Captain watched his cargo of medical supplies sit in a warehouse. He had traveled 3 weeks to deliver them, but the currency exchange rate had changed 5 times during his journey. The medicine that had been worth a profit when he left his was now worth less than his fuel costs. He could not afford to sell at the current rate, but he could not afford to take the cargo back either. Across the galaxy, thousands of other merchants faced the same problem. The trade network's automated systems had handled currency fluctuations smoothly when humans maintained them. Now the systems gave contradictory information, updated too slowly, or crashed entirely. Trade between worlds slowed to a crawl. Planets that imported food faced shortages. Colonies that depended on manufactured goods ran out of supplies. Desperate governors began seizing ships and cargo, triggering trade disputes that escalated into armed confrontations. 3 minor wars had already started over resource conflicts. In the Outer Rim, Commander Wu had led joint military operations against the Ravager pirates for 5 years. She had developed tactics specifically designed to counter their hit-and-run attacks. She had trained other officers, shared intelligence, and coordinated defense grids across dozens of systems. With her gone, the Ravagers were running wild. They had captured 6 systems in the past month. Their ships attacked cargo vessels, raided colonies, and disappeared before defense forces could respond. The Enmoth fleets sent ships to hunt them, but the pirates always seemed to know where the fleets would be. They struck where defenses were weakest. Admiral studied battle reports in his command center and tried to understand what was happening. The Ravagers were not smarter than before. They were not stronger, but somehow they were winning. Then one of his intelligence officers showed him something disturbing. She displayed tactical analysis reports that Commander Wu had filed over the years. The reports predicted Ravager behavior with remarkable accuracy. They explained how the pirates thought, where they would strike next, and how to counter them effectively. "Did anyone read these reports?" asked. The intelligence officer looked embarrassed. "We received them, Admiral, but we assumed our own analysis was sufficient. The human commander was. We thought she was being too cautious, too complicated. Our way of fighting has worked for thousands of years." Wanted to throw something. Instead, he pulled up a star map and began comparing Wu's predictions to current Ravager activity. She had been right about everything. If they had followed her advice, the pirates would never have gained this much ground. The communication problems were getting worse too. Engineer Bora had managed the quantum entanglement network that allowed real-time communication across vast distances. The network consisted of millions of synchronized nodes, each one requiring constant adjustment to maintain connection. Without Bora and her team, the nodes were drifting out of sync. Messages that should have arrived instantly now took hours or even days. In some sectors, communication had failed completely. Fleet commanders could not coordinate with their admirals. Governors could not report emergencies to the Council. The galaxy was becoming disconnected. The Council itself struggled to meet. Representatives from distant worlds could not participate in real-time discussions. Important votes were delayed. Crisis responses moved too slowly to help anyone. But the most painful realization came from the scientific community. Professor Yang had been a quiet presence at galactic research conferences for decades. He rarely gave presentations. He mostly asked questions, offered suggestions, and worked on collaborative projects. Other scientists had appreciated his contributions but never thought he was essential. Now they understood the truth. A moth physicist was trying to complete work on a new propulsion system. He reviewed his notes and discovered that Professor Yang had solved a critical equation 3 years ago. The solution had seemed simple at the time, just one piece of a larger puzzle. But now, trying to move forward without Yang's insights, the physicist realized the problem was nearly impossible. That simple solution had been genius. A medical researcher made a similar discovery. She was working on a cure for a genetic disease. Her notes showed that a human doctor had suggested a specific approach to the problem 2 years earlier. At the time, the suggestion had seemed obvious. Now she realized it was the key to everything. Without it, she had no idea how to proceed. Across hundreds of research stations, scientists began reviewing their work with new eyes. They found human contributions everywhere. Small suggestions that had unlocked major breakthroughs. Simple observations that had changed entire fields of study. quiet collaboration that had made the impossible possible. The humans had never demanded credit. They had simply helped and moved on to the next problem. Now that they were gone, progress had stopped. Research teams that had been racing toward discoveries found themselves stuck. Problems that had seemed solvable now appeared impossible. In the council chambers, High Chancellor faced angry representatives from across the galaxy. They had stopped being polite. Some shouted accusations. Others demanded his resignation. The chamber that had laughed at humanity 2 months ago was now filled with fear and rage. "You told us the problems were temporary," a moth representative clicked furiously. "My has 20,000 sick with fever. Where is the help you promised?" "My colonies are starving," a governor said. "Trade has collapsed. Ships will not come because they cannot trust the currency exchange." "The Ravagers have taken one of our mining stations," another voice called out. "They killed 300 workers. Where was the council fleet?" Raised his hands, trying to restore order. "We are working to solve these problems. We have dispatched engineers, doctors, and military forces." "Your engineers do not understand the systems," someone interrupted. "Your doctors do not have the training. Your military cannot fight effectively. We need the humans back." "No," shouted. The chamber fell silent. "We will not beg humans to return. They are a young species with barely any experience. We have managed this galaxy for thousands of years. We do not need them." "Then why is everything falling apart?" the governor asked quietly. Had no answer. He looked around the chamber at the desperate faces staring back at him. He saw fear, anger, and something worse, loss of faith. They no longer believed the council could protect them. "I propose we send a diplomatic mission to human space," the governor continued. "We will apologize for our treatment of them and ask them to return." "No," said again. "We will not apologize. They were wrong to leave. They sabotaged our systems. They must return and fix what they broke." "And if they refuse?" His expression hardened. "Then we will force them. I am authorizing Admiral to take a fleet to human territory. He will deliver our demands. Humans will comply or face the consequences." The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives supported the military option. Others thought it was madness. The debate raged for hours. Finally, a vote was called. By a narrow margin, the council authorized the military mission. Admiral would take a fleet of warships to human space. He would make the council's demands clear. Humanity would return, or there would be war. Watched the vote count and felt a mixture of relief and dread. He had won the authorization, but something felt wrong. The humans had left so quietly, so calmly. They had not threatened or made demands. They had simply walked away. People did not walk away quietly unless they had a plan. That night, sat in his office reading intelligence reports about human military capabilities. The information was sparse. Humans had always been secretive about their defense forces. The council had assumed this meant they were weak. Now wondered if they had been hiding strength, not weakness. He thought about how efficiently humans had evacuated. Over 2 million people had left council space in a matter of weeks, perfectly coordinated, without a single incident. That level of organization required serious planning and resources. He pulled up the file on Ambassador 1. The human had seemed so calm when delivering his resignation. Not angry or emotional, just calm, like someone who had already thought through every possibility and made his choice. Felt doubt creeping into his mind, but it was too late now. The fleet was already preparing to depart. In 1 week, Admiral would arrive at human space and deliver the Council's ultimatum. The galaxy would learn if humanity was as weak as everyone assumed, or if they had been underestimated all along. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and watched the human frontier station grow larger on the. Behind him, 23 warships waited in formation. It was a strong fleet, enough to intimidate most enemies. The station was called Sentinel Watch. It hung in space at the edge of human territory, a silent guardian marking the boundary between Council space and human worlds. The station looked ordinary, similar to dozens of other frontier posts across the galaxy, but felt uneasy. "Send the communication request," he ordered. His communications officer worked her console for a moment, then looked up with confusion. "Sir, they are responding immediately. They are inviting us to dock and meet with Ambassador Sojin." "That fast?" "Yes, sir. It is as if they were expecting us." Did not like that. He had brought a war fleet to deliver demands, hoping to shock the humans into compliance. Instead, they welcomed him like a scheduled guest. "Very well, prepare my shuttle, but keep the fleet at battle readiness." "Sir, they are requesting we power down our weapons before approaching." "Absolutely not. Tell them our weapons stay active." The communications officer relayed the message. A moment later, she looked up again. "They say that is acceptable, but we should be aware that their defensive systems are active as well." Felt his unease growing. He had reviewed intelligence on Sentinel Watch. According to their files, it was a minor station with minimal defenses, not the kind of place that made demands of a Council fleet. The shuttle carried and 5 officers to the station. As they approached, studied the structure through the windows. It looked normal on the surface, but something felt different. The hull plating seemed thicker than necessary. The sensor arrays were more sophisticated than a simple border station should need. They docked and walked through the airlock. A human woman waited for them in the reception bay. She wore the same gray diplomatic uniform that Ambassador One had worn. Her expression was polite but neutral. "Admiral," she said in perfect, "I am Ambassador Sojin. Welcome to Sentinel Watch. Please follow me to the conference room." Wanted to take control of the conversation immediately. "We are not here for pleasantries. The Galactic Council has sent me to deliver." "I know why you are here," Sojin interrupted gently. "That is why I prepared the conference room. We will be more comfortable there." She turned and walked down a corridor, and his officers followed, exchanging glances. This was not how they had expected things to go. The conference room was simple. A large table, comfortable chairs, and windows showing the stars outside. Sojin gestured for them to sit. "Would you like refreshments?" she asked. "No," said firmly. "Ambassador, the Galactic Council demands that humanity return immediately. Your departure has caused significant disruption. You must resume your previous roles and responsibilities." Sojin sat across from him. She folded her hands on the table and looked at him calmly. "No." "Blinked what?" "No, we will not return. We will not resume our previous roles. Humanity has left the Galactic Council permanently." "You do not understand. This is not a request. It is a demand backed by military force. My fleet." "Your fleet of 23 ships," Sojin said. "Yes, we are aware. Admiral, let me be very clear. Humanity spent 70 years working within the Council. We were insulted, dismissed, and taken for granted. When we tried to speak, we were laughed at. When we needed help, we were ignored. We left because staying was no longer acceptable." "The Council is willing to offer you better terms," said, though this was not entirely true. "But you must return first." "What terms?" Hesitated. He had not actually been given better terms to offer. His orders were to demand compliance and threaten force if necessary. "We can discuss that once you agree to return." Sojin smiled slightly. "Admiral, do you really think we would abandon everything we built, evacuate over 2 million people across hundreds of worlds, and then come running back because you showed up with warships?" "Your people are suffering too," argued. "Your economy must be strained. You have lost access to Council markets and resources." "Our economy is fine. We prepared for this possibility for years. We have resources, trade agreements with independent worlds, and strong self-sufficiency. "We are not desperate, Admiral. You are." Felt anger rising. "You think you can defy the Council? We have thousands of ships, millions of warriors. We can." "You can what?" Sojin's voice remained calm. "Invade human space, attack our worlds, start a war that will drain your already struggling economy and military, while the Ravagers take more of your territory, while disease spreads on you, while your infrastructure continues failing." The Admiral had no answer. She was right and they both knew it. "Let me tell you what will happen if you try to force us," Sojin continued. "First, you will discover that humanity is not as weak as you assumed. We kept our true military capabilities secret for good reason. You are sitting in a border station that has enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet." Laughed, "That is impossible, this station." Alarms suddenly blared on his officers' portable scanners. They pulled out their devices and stared at the readings in shock. "Sir," one of them whispered, "I am detecting massive weapons systems. They were hidden but they just activated. This station. It is a fortress." Sojin touched a control panel on the table. The windows became displays showing tactical information, saw the truth laid out before him. Sentinel Watch was not a simple border station. It was a heavily armed military installation with weapons powerful enough to threaten an entire fleet. "How did we not know?" asked quietly. "Because we did not want you to know. Admiral, we have 63 stations like this one along our borders. We have a defense fleet 3 times larger than your intelligence estimates. We have weapons technology you have never seen. For 70 years, we worked quietly in your space, fixing your problems and keeping things running. We also prepared for the day we might need to defend ourselves from you." The windows changed again. Now they showed space around the station. Felt his blood run cold. Ships were appearing, dozens of them, materializing out of nowhere. They had been cloaked, invisible to his fleet's sensors. They surrounded the Council warships in a perfect tactical formation. "Stealth technology," one of his officers breathed. "They have stealth ships." "We have many things you do not know about," Sojin said. "We shared some of our technology with the Council. We kept the rest for ourselves. That was our mistake, perhaps. We were too generous. We should have kept more secrets." Stared at the displays. His fleet was surrounded and, if fighting started, they would last minutes at best. The Council had sent him here believing humans were weak and desperate. Instead, he faced strength and confidence. "What do you want?" he asked. "Nothing from you, Admiral. We want to be left alone. We want to build our own civilization without interference from people who do not respect us. The Council will not accept this. Then the Council will continue to suffer. Admiral, I am going to tell you something important. Listen carefully." Sojin leaned forward. "Humanity was holding your civilization together. We maintained systems you did not understand. We solved problems you did not see. We worked without recognition or reward because we believed in cooperation." "That was your choice," said. "Yes, it was. And now we have made a different choice. The Council can survive without us, but it will be smaller, weaker, and less advanced. Your golden age is over. Accept it." Felt a cold certainty settling over him. This mission had failed before it started. The Council had sent him to intimidate humans, but humans were not intimidated. They were prepared, powerful, and determined. "What should I tell the Council?" he asked. "Tell them the truth. Tell them humanity will not return. Tell them they should focus on fixing their own problems instead of blaming us." Sojin stood up. "Your ships are free to leave. We will not attack unless you give us reason to. But Admiral, deliver one more message for me." "What message?" "If the Council attempts military action against human worlds, we will respond with overwhelming force. We do not want war, but if you bring war to us, you will lose. Badly." And his officers were escorted back to their shuttle. As they flew back to the eternal victory, none of them spoke. They were all thinking about the same thing. The Council had made a terrible mistake. When returned to his flagship, he immediately ordered the fleet to withdraw from human space. His crew looked relieved. They had seen the same tactical displays he had. They knew how close they had come to disaster. The journey back to Council space took 3 weeks. Spent that time writing his report. He described everything he had seen and heard. He explained that humans were far more powerful than anyone had realized. He strongly advised against any further military action. When he finally arrived back at Council headquarters, he delivered his report to High Chancellor personally. The Chancellor read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is unacceptable," finally said. "It is the truth, Chancellor. The Council cannot appear weak. We cannot let one species defy us." "With respect, Chancellor, they are not defying us. They have simply left. We are the ones who cannot accept it." Stood up and walked to his office window. Below, he could see the Council chambers. Beyond that, the city stretched to the horizon, the heart of galactic civilization, or what was supposed to be the heart. "What is happening out there?" asked quietly. "In the galaxy." Took a breath. "It is getting worse, Chancellor. The Ravagers have taken 4 more systems. The Moth has lost 8,000 lives to disease. Trade has collapsed across 20 sectors. Our own fleet is struggling to maintain order. Several colony worlds are threatening to leave the Council." "How long until total collapse?" "Unknown, months maybe, unless something changes." Turned around. He looked old, suddenly tired. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "Negotiate. Offer humans real terms. Apologize for how we treated them. Ask them to help us, not as subjects but as equals." "The Council will never approve that." "Then the Council will preside over ruins." They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, nodded. "I will call for a vote, but I think you know what will happen." "You will be removed from power," said. "Yes, and perhaps that is appropriate. I was the one who laughed at Ambassador 1. I was the one who said humans did not matter," smiled bitterly. "I was a fool." Within a week, High Chancellor was gone, voted out by a council desperate for new leadership. A new coalition took power, led by Councillor Thane of the. His first action was to send a message to human space. The message was simple: "Please, can we talk?" 6 months had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council. The galaxy was dying slowly, choking on its own pride and failure. Captain Ho stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Reconciliation and watched the council chambers grow larger on his. He had been chosen for this mission because of his calm temperament and long experience with alien species. Even so, he felt nervous. "Sir, we are being given priority docking clearance," his communications officer reported. "They are treating us like visiting dignitaries." "Good," Ho said. "That is a better start than last time." He thought about Ambassador One's final meeting with the Council, how they had laughed and mocked him, how they had dismissed humanity as irrelevant. That had been 6 months ago. Everything had changed since then. The Reconciliation docked smoothly. Ho put on his formal uniform and checked his appearance in a mirror. He looked tired. The past 6 months had been exhausting for humanity too. They had absorbed over 2 million returning citizens, reorganized their economy, and strengthened their defenses. But they had also watched from a distance as the galaxy fell apart. It had not brought Ho any satisfaction. He had friends in council space, good people who were now suffering because of decisions made by arrogant leaders. A security team met him at the airlock. They were polite, almost deferential. They escorted him through corridors that seemed emptier than before. Many of the offices and shops were closed. The station felt like it was dying. The council chambers looked even worse. Ho had seen recordings of the old sessions, when the chamber was full and busy. Now, less than half the seats were occupied. Many species had stopped sending representatives. Some had left the council entirely. Others simply could not afford to maintain embassies here anymore. Counselor Thane waited for him at the entrance. The leader was tall and thin, with gray skin and large, expressive eyes. He looked exhausted. "Captain Ho," Thane said, bowing deeply. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for even responding to our message." "Of course, Counselor. We are willing to talk." "Please come inside. The session is about to begin." They walked together into the chamber. Ho noticed that the speaking circle where one had stood was gone. Instead, there were seats arranged in a more equal circle. No one sat higher than anyone else anymore. Representatives from across the galaxy watched as Ho entered. Their expressions ranged from hope to desperation to shame. No one laughed. No one made jokes. The chamber was quiet. Thane led Ho to a seat and gestured for him to sit. Then the counselor stood and addressed the chamber. "Members of the Galactic Council, we are honored to host Captain Ho of humanity. He has agreed to hear our petition. I ask that everyone show him the respect he deserves, and the respect we failed to show his people before." The chamber murmured agreement. Ho saw several representatives nodding earnestly. Thane continued, "I will not pretend this is anything other than what it is. We are desperate. The galaxy is failing. We need help, and we need it from the people we wronged most deeply." He turned to Ho. "Captain, I speak for the new council leadership when I offer humanity our deepest apologies. We were arrogant. We were cruel. We dismissed your contributions and mocked your concerns. We thought you needed us when the truth was that we needed you. We were wrong and we are sorry." The chamber fell silent. Ho could hear his own breathing. He had expected some acknowledgement of past mistakes, but this level of honesty surprised him. "Thank you, Counselor," Ho said carefully. "That means a great deal, but apologies alone cannot change what happened." "I know. That is why I am prepared to offer humanity real terms for your return." Thane pulled up a holographic display. It showed a detailed proposal that had clearly taken weeks to prepare. Ho read through it carefully. The terms were generous, far more than he had expected. Full voting rights for humanity, including veto power on any legislation affecting human interests. Formal recognition and credit for all human contributions to science, infrastructure, and defense. Anti-discrimination reforms to protect humanity and other marginalized species. Independent military rights for self-defense. And perhaps most importantly, a seat at the center table, not the margins. "This is substantial," Ho admitted, "but I cannot make this decision alone. My government must review these terms." "Of course, we do not expect an immediate answer, but Captain, I need you to understand something." Thane looked around the chamber. "We are out of time. The galaxy is collapsing. If humanity does not return soon, there may be nothing left to return to." A Moth representative stood up. Her voice was clicking with distress. "Mai has lost 30,000 lives to disease. Our hospitals are overwhelmed. We need human doctors, please." Another representative stood. "The Ravagers have taken 12 of our systems. They are threatening our core worlds. We cannot stop them without human tactical support." One by one, representatives rose to speak. They described collapsing trade networks, failing infrastructure, spreading violence, and economic ruin. The stories were heartbreaking. Ho listened to them all, feeling a weight settling on his shoulders. Finally, an elderly stood. Ho recognized him from the files. This was former Admiral, the one who had led the failed military mission to human space. "Captain Ho," said slowly, "I was part of the council that dismissed your people. I laughed when Ambassador 1 resigned. I thought you were weak and foolish." He paused. "I was the weak and foolish one. I am sorry. Whatever you decide, please know that some of us have learned. We will never make this mistake again." Sat down. The chamber was quiet again. Ho felt emotion welling up inside him. These were people who had hurt humanity badly, but they were also people who were suffering now and learning and trying to do better. "I need to consult with my government," Ho said, "but I will be honest with you. I personally believe we should help, not because you deserve it, but because innocent people are dying. Children are starving. Patients are suffering. They did not choose the council's arrogance. They should not pay the price for it. He stood up. I will take your proposal back to Earth. I will recommend that we negotiate. But understand this clearly. If humanity returns, it will be as equals. We will not go back to being dismissed and mocked. Those days are over forever. Yes, Thane said, forever. The council session ended. Ho spent 3 more days at the station, touring damaged facilities and meeting with desperate officials. He saw the reality of the crisis with his own eyes. It was worse than the reports had indicated. On the flight back to Earth, Ho drafted his report. He recommended accepting the council's terms with some modifications. He argued that humanity had made its point. They had proven their value. Now it was time to show mercy. The response from Earth's government came quickly. They agreed with his recommendation. Negotiations would begin immediately. It took 2 weeks to finalize the agreement. Humanity drove a hard bargain, adding protections and guarantees that went beyond the Council's initial offer. But eventually, both sides signed the treaty. Humanity would return to galactic affairs, but everything had changed. Dr. Haywan was among the first to go back. She led medical teams to the Moth, where the disease outbreak had killed over 50,000 people. Her teams brought advanced treatments and immediately began training local doctors. Within a month, the outbreak was under control. Engineer Jin returned to Nexus Prime. She took one look at the failing systems and shook her head in disbelief. It took her team 3 months to repair the damage and restore full functionality. But she did it, and she trained engineers to maintain the systems properly. Commander Young led human battle groups back to the Outer Rim. Working with Council forces, they launched a coordinated offensive against the Ravagers. Within 2 months, the pirates were in retreat. Within 4 months, all captured territory had been liberated. Slowly, steadily, the galaxy began to heal, but it was not the same galaxy as before. 1 year after humanity's return, Ambassador One stood once again in the council chambers, but this time his seat was at the center table. When he spoke, the chamber listened in respectful silence. No one interrupted, no one laughed. He delivered a speech about cooperation and mutual respect. He talked about how different species each brought unique strengths to civilization. He reminded everyone that arrogance and prejudice benefited no one. When he finished, the chamber applauded. It was genuine appreciation, not polite obligation. After the session, Counselor Thane approached One privately. "I wanted to thank you personally," Thane said. "You could have let us fall. Some would say we deserved it." "Maybe," One replied. "But revenge would not have brought back the lives lost. It would not have helped the innocent people suffering. We did the right thing. Your people are remarkable. You were dismissed and humiliated, yet you came back to help us anyway." One smiled slightly. "We are not remarkable, Counselor. We are just people trying to do our best. But I think we learned something important from all this." "What is that?" "Power is not always loud. The most important work is often done quietly by people no one notices. We were those people, and when we left, the silence spoke louder than any weapon or threat." Thane nodded slowly. The galaxy learned that lesson the hard way. "Yes, but learning is what matters. The old council would never have apologized. They would never have offered real equality. The new council did both. That is progress." Other species had been watching humanity's treatment closely. Marginalized peoples across the galaxy had taken note. If humans could demand equality and get it, so could they. Within months, reform movements had started on dozens of worlds. The council that had once been rigid and hierarchical was being forced to become more democratic. Some of the old powers resisted, but they had learned that resistance had consequences. When you pushed people too far, they left. And when they left, you discovered how much you needed them. 5 years after the crisis, the Galactic Council looked completely different. New species had joined. Old hierarchies had been dismantled. Decisions were made more collectively, and at the heart of it all, humanity sat as equal partners. Captain Ho, now promoted to ambassador, sometimes thought about that day when one had walked out of the council chambers. How everyone had laughed. How certain they were that humans would come crawling back. They had been so wrong. Humans had not come crawling back. They had walked back proudly on their own terms to help build something better. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate quiet people. They may be holding everything together, and if they choose to let go, the whole world might fall apart.